Hello and welcome to another episode of Movies That Make Us. I'm Jake.
I'm Tracy.
And we have two special guests with us today from Matinee Heroes, Craig and Alan. Welcome, guys.
Well, thank you. That was pretty cool. I'd never seen that before.
I thought we were going to be in the ring all of a sudden.
Yeah.
7 days.
Yeah.
7 days.
I forgot to tell you, that's what happens on the show now. You have 7 dadays to live after you've been a guest on the show. So
Way things have been going.
It's for our own sick and twisted pleasure.
The way things have been going recently, 7 days is too long. So,
Yeah, really.
That's a lifetime in 2020.
Yeah, it'll be a whole nother show by then.
That's very true. Very true.
Well, guys, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it. We've had the opportunity, I think all three of us, Valerie is missing tonight, but the three of us have been on your show before. We're glad, and we've had you on the show before, Craig. We're glad to have you on the show finally, Alan.
Thank you. It's good to be on. I'm happy to be here.
Alan is like Bigfoot. He exists, but we don't have many pictures of him, and when it does, it's often blurry or shiny in this instance.
Well, I'd like to say that's ruined now, and you're going to be all over the internet after this show. But the truth is, you're probably still pretty safe. So the amount of viewers that we have,
Yeah,
Very most likely, yeah.
we're just proving why we are both audio podcast only.
Oh yeah. We have faces made for radio.
Yeah, I don't. Maybe even faces for print. I'm not even sure. Even our voices don't sound like the way we look. So it's probably even worse than that.
Yeah, faces for carrier pigeon. So.
Tie a note to a rat and send him down a hole. Okay.
Yeah,
No, I think you're fine. I think you guys look great. I don't see any problems at all. Listen, it's not like we're winning any beauty pageants over here anytime soon.
What are you talking about?
Right, Tracy will. Sure.
Tracy's looking fantastic. Since I've met Tracy, he has gotten a little grayer, but he's gotten a lot smaller and more handsome.
Well, Craig, your check is in the mail. Thank you.
Yeah, well, that's the only way I'm making money right now.
Smart. Keep it going. Keep that flow going.
That's right.
Well, and you guys, so Matinee Heroes just wrapped up the first season of Cast Off yesterday, which we all had an opportunity to participate in.
Yeah, both Tracy.
Both
Tracy and Valerie made it to the semifinals.
Yeah, I was hoping for an all movies that make us final, but both Val and Tracy disappointed me in that. So.
Yeah, we kind of wet the bed.
Well, Val, let's be honest, Val came much closer than Tracy did because
Sandy wiped the floor with me.
Yeah, he obliterated you to the point where, because I'm the executive producer, I gave him Charles Nelson Riley's the point because I loved it so much. The other judges didn't actually vote for it, but I vetoed it and said, look, it's not going to affect the outcome, but he deserves a point for Charles Nelson Riley. But otherwise, it was pretty much a total devastation.
Hey, losing to the eventual champion, there's no shame.
And Randy did it again. Last night for Pulp Fiction, it wasn't as close as it looked. I try to make it look as close as possible. I don't manipulate anything. That's the actual order, so I don't really try to stack it so it looks like there's going to be a tie. But it really was. He took he fell behind right away and then just swept the rest of the board. And you try to make it a little bit more dramatic. And I think I did, but Randy deserved it. He did a great job, and Patrick was great too.
Patrick had some great choices. That was a hard movie to recast.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and I think one of the reasons why it was hard is because everybody was trying to think of an overall cast that would mesh together, because that's what Quentin Tarantino does. But that's not how the game is played. The game is actor by actor. Right. And maybe in season 2 we'll give an extra credit point for whoever's got the best overall cast as well. Maybe that'll be a bonus point.
Oh, that's cool.
Maybe that'd be a tiebreaker. I don't know, but yeah.
So I was just going to ask if there was going to be a season 2. So I guess
I don't know right now. I'll be honest with you, because it's the computer that I use is so borderline as it is that, and it's so difficult for me to the first thing I do when a show's over is I walk out to my wife who's watched it and I go, what went wrong? Because it's so difficult to do the buttons and get everything prepped and do it. And I got to be somewhat entertaining and on my toes. We'll see. what I need is more participants. It's a lot easier to get judges than it is to get participants, and and so we'll see. I'm gonna put out the call, make some adjustments, and see what we can do.
Cool.
Yeah.
But I really
it's a fun
appreciated
format.
you guys coming out for the first round.
Oh,
it'll
thank you.
definitely be at live Comic-Cons. That is something that I guarantee you, if they pick
Yeah.
us, we will show up, because I think this will be much better with a crowd that gets to vote.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree.
That doesn't know you, because I don't want the internet to decide, because then
Right.
it's just whoever's got the most followers. But in a room,
Yeah, I'm stuffing that ballot box for Tracy and Val if we have that opportunity, right? I mean,
Checks in
Well,
the mail.
I got their backs. They don't
And I-
stuff it for me, obviously, but I would.
I do want to say that Randy even won the prediction bracket.
I know.
So
Really?
so not
He
only
clean
did
sweep.
he did everything. So he not only did he win the game, he
awesome.
won the prediction ballot. But
Well
we'll
done.
see about
What do you
season
guys
2.
have? So this month I know is your guys' birthday month, and we've had a couple of episodes on Matinee Heroes that have had to do with that. Your birthday was yesterday, right, Craig? And then
Valerie and I share a birthday, so we both turned 41 yesterday.
Yep,
That
and I turned some.
yeah, exactly.
No, I am considerably older than Valerie. But yes, August 23rd was Valerie's birthday as well. So happy birthday, Valerie.
Yeah,
Even though
Alan,
she's
you
not
were
here.
earlier in the month.
Yeah,
So you guys had
August
a
8th.
couple of. You guys had a couple of episodes this month that had that you guys picked. I think Alan, yours was Angels with Dirty Faces, right?
Yeah, it's an
And then-
all-timer for me. I love that film.
Awesome. And Craig, what was your?
Well, it's the one
Birthday
that's
pick.
currently out now, The Hunt for Red October. What we do is
right.
we pick movies. Now I just happened to pick a movie that was a heroic movie, but we pick movies that eschew the format, or we're not enslaved to the format for our birthday picks. So if we wanted to pick something that was just a drama with no heroes, we could do that. But it just happened to be that we both had picked somewhat heroic. I think your movie, Alan, was a little more anti-hero than it was
Yeah.
hero, but it was still a
was-
great movie. It's a fantastic movie.
Yeah, it was a crime film. But I mean, like, what, last year you picked Mosquito Coast, or it might have been 2 years ago.
I think last year was Robin Williams.
That's right. We
month.
did Robin. We did
that's
Robin
right.
Williams entirely that month. Yep.
Because I picked What Dreams May Come, and then you said, "Oh, I want to do a whole month of Robin Williams."
Yeah, and I did World According to Garp. So yeah,
Nice.
I love that film. That might be my favorite Robin Williams movie. Period. Anyway, but yeah,
And Lithgow's amazing in it.
yeah.
I just did Tango and Cash with Stephen Izzy. From,
yeah.
Everything I Live From, and I hadn't seen that movie since it came out, and seeing Kurt Russell dressed as a woman made me appreciate John Lithgow even more. In A World According to Garp. 'Cause-
My mom loved Tango and Cash.
oh,
That is a
Loved
weird
it.
sentence
Mostly
taken out of
mostly
context.
because
to
she
sound
really
strange.
liked the actors.
Yeah.
It's a fun movie. It's still fun. It holds up. It's a blast. We might probably do it eventually in our show. So. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Hey.
I will say that Kurt
Shake his
Russell
head.
is charming. Kurt Russell is charming AF in that. But
Right, yeah.
Stallone, oh my God, it's like every other sentence is a very bad joke, and I think he was trying to make up for the fact that he almost ruined Beverly Hills Cop, and so he was trying to make a cop buddy movie, and someone didn't really explain to him how comedy works. You don't.
What are you talking about? He is the master of comedy. Have you not seen Rhinestone?
I saw Oscar.
Oh boy. I don't know that I've
Stop
ever
or My
heard
Mom Will
anyone-
shoot.
Yeah,
I don't know that I've ever heard
Oh,
anyone
yeah.
talk
Well, you know the
a
story
master
behind
of
Stop or
comedy.
My Mom Will Shoot, right? The story behind that is that Schwarzenegger and Stallone are always competing. And this is what I heard from another podcast, Junk Food Cinema, but I'm sure it's true. Schwarzenegger and Stallone were always fighting against each other for parts, and Stallone would always scoop in at the last minute to get parts from Schwarzenegger. So Schwarzenegger made it so that because he would have his agent say, well, when whatever Schwarzenegger's interested in, I want to scoop it up. So Schwarzenegger, to screw with Stallone, said, I'm going to go forward on this really awful script from this really terrible movie. It's gonna be awful. I know it's gonna be bad. I'm gonna make it look like I want to be in this movie, and he's gonna scoop it up and take it. And sure enough, he did. It was Schwarzenegger screwing
That's
with
awesome.
Stallone. So
Wow.
yeah,
I feel
I
bad
hope
for
that's
Estelle
true.
Getty though. That's the one. I mean, she didn't really do any movies. She was only Sophia. This was her only real breakout attempt, and it was just awful.
Well, so what do you guys have coming up? I think September is your Patreon month, and then October.
We have villains in October, so it's a couple
Nice.
of horror films we're going to be doing.
I think we decided we're going to do. You want to do Nightmare on Elm Street?
Yep.
We're going to do. Again, Alan knows this. I'm not good with this, and my wife suggested it. We're going to do Dolores Umbridge from
Harry Potter. Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix.
So we're going to do that one.
She's an incredible villain.
Yeah, so and that's what we want. We don't no heroics. So even if like Nightmare on Elm Street, there is no hero in that movie. Maybe Heather, what's her name? Heather Langenbach or
Heather Langenkamp. Langenkamp. Yeah,
yeah. It's been a while. She might be the hero in it, but really she's the victim that happens to kind of wait out the villain.
Yeah,
Right.
We're gonna do The Fly.
Nice.
And that's an all timer for me. I love that movie. It's it's a great film. I think we're doing Wall Street.
Yep, Gordon Gekko. So we kind of throw in weird, and then we're going to leave one open for anybody to suggest because, well, you know how it works. I always, at the beginning of the month before, I throw out to our special secret group of qualified people, hey, who wants to talk with us about this? And if anybody has a good suggestion, because we're always open to suggestions, but I noticed that if you don't actually have a list of movies, people don't really go, especially if it's not their podcast, they don't really volunteer titles. They will volunteer to something you picked, but they will not nominate something themselves. So
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. Well, and tonight we're talking about a movie where, I don't know, there's not a lot of good guys.
What are you talking about? Walter Mathau is.
Listen.
There's two people in this movie that are the heroes. Walter Mathau, obviously, because he's going to teach these kids how to win, even if when they don't. And after watching it, I just watched it about 2.5 hours ago. Lupus catching that ball at the end is the heroic moment, and that's it.
That's the moment of the whole movie. Yeah, for sure.
That's their victory. That's their victory.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I just felt like, so I just watched it recently too, and for those tuning in, we're talking about the Bad News Bears. This was
the original.
You suggested this for
we're talking about this movie right here.
Look at this.
Oh,
Bam. Love it.
The original, not that Billy Bob Thornton horrible thing.
So I made sure that on the title card and everything, it was the Bad News Bears, because when you look it up on IMDb, the original is the Bad News Bears. The remake is just Bad News Bears.
Yes, I saw that. I saw that because I was looking it up too. I was bringing it up and said, "Wait, what's this?" Oh, that's the Linklater movie. And I like Richard Linklater, but I'm a fan, but I think that was a poor choice. I think he wanted to make a movie reminiscent of the movies he loved, which, if you look at I think the Bad News Bears is, if you look at Dazed and Confused and the Bad News Bears, it feels tonally similar. Because the way the characters are. So I could see why Linklater really loved it, but there's just no touch in the original. The original's great.
You can't make that movie now. That's why.
Nope.
Oh, no, you absolutely can't make that movie now. There's no way.
But that's that's the greatness of it. That's a
when
real.
He pulls up to the ball field and he pulls out the beer and he's got the open liquor bottle in the car as well, and he's pouring it into the beer. I'm like, no way that gets made today.
No.
Absolutely.
It's when they get the red stripes at the end. It's instead of champagne, they get red stripes.
Yeah.
Yes.
But that is
no way that's happening in a movie either. Unless
but that's a real movie.
Type of thing, though.
That movie is what really happened in the 70s and 80s.
Exactly. I lived it. I know exactly what it was.
Too.
I was six years old when the Bad News Bears came out, and there's something genuine about it. Just the way the kids behave. That's what kids were. A lot of this stuff is glossed over now, and we don't encourage. They make it like we're encouraging their behavior, or we have to have these kids that are, golden angels, and just kids aren't. Kids are terrible. Okay,
right?
We were terrible. These kids are bad, and we want to. It feels
parents
more
were just as bad then too.
Oh yeah. That whole stuff. All the stuff with Vic Morrow. If anybody had a little league team, you saw that every time. There's always a parent that was just like over the top over their kids, and
they almost always were the coach with a kid on the team. It was never someone who didn't have a kid on the team. It was always a coach, a father, and their son, and he was always putting way too much pressure on the son, or putting the son in up first, or in the leadoff spot, or whatever the kid wanted, and you just had to suck it up. But the kids are the real thing, is because that's how they talked.
Exactly.
And that's how they acted. And It's very much a Robert Altman film where the kids talking over each other, picking on each other constantly.
Yeah, I mean, there are sequences where you have to really pay attention because everybody's talking on top of each other, and so you have to listen closely to what people are saying. One of the things that I love, I mean, we've covered the Bad News Bears on our show, and we had to. I mean, I think it's my favorite sports film. So it's a movie that, I mean, because it's kind of an anti-sports film because these kids are here to play and have fun, and I mean, I don't want to offend anybody, but it's a movie about how American exceptionalism kind of ruins childhood, because it's about these kids just want to play, they just want to have fun and play with, and they make it they boost it into this capitalism sort of, you have to win at all costs kind of thing. And the kids, they just want to have fun and play, and they miss the point. And I think it's a great film like that. I played the Bad News Bears in front of an audience about 3 years ago in the screening at the Alamo Draft House here in Houston. We had this event called Hullabaloo, where myself and the programming director, a couple other people, Meredith Borders, and who writes for Fangoria, and we all picked movies that we want to see with an audience. So I picked.
Don't forget the key thing to that whole thing. People buy tickets not knowing what the movies are.
That's right. So, it's a secret.
Oh, cool.
It's a one-day film festival. You go in blind, and they pick the movies, but you have no idea. So you just buy the ticket, and you hope it's a good slate.
Yeah, you hope we picked right. But
That's cool. I like that.
That's kind of fun.
It got this year we didn't get to do it because the world ended.
Right.
But and I played it, and I was wearing this shirt, and I came out in front and said, "Is there anybody who hadn't seen the Bad News Bears?" And most of the audience raised their hand. I think you were there, Craig, right?
Yes, for the Bad News Bear. Yes, I was for that one because that was right before I left for Houston. I left Houston. Yeah.
So, I mean, half the audience raised their hand; they hadn't seen it, and just watching them watch that movie, especially when Tanner drops, all the words that he drops. It's just, I looked, I especially looked at people watching that, and you can see the jaws drop. It's like, and I said right when I introduced the movie, I said, "Look, this is a very '70s movie. It is it is not '80s. It is not '90s. It's not present day. These kids cuss up." They cuss so bad that your ears will turn blue. And go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, and not just, but just the terms that they use too. I mean, Tanner, when he's saying, this is a team full of, and then he lists what it's a team full of.
Yeah, that sentence would get you banned for life. Cancel culture would have taken him out.
Instant R rating.
I told my wife, I said, if this movie were to play on any of the major streaming services, and I don't know that it is, I looked for it and I found it on Amazon Prime and I could watch it through IMDb TV. But if it was to play on any, it would have one of those warnings on the front that like, this is representative of the time that it was made, and what was acceptable then is not acceptable
like what they're
now.
doing for Gone with the Wind. And
they should do that for the Bad News Bears, honestly. I mean, I they really should, because I mean, it's the parenting in that movie is like, wow, back in the 70s, it's like
there isn't any parenting in that movie. That's the thing. You never see anybody's parent except unless they're there to watch the game or coach the game.
Yeah.
Other than that, there are no parents, and that's how it was. Yeah. There literally was the sun comes up, mom and dad go to work, gone, and they even tell you don't come back until the streetlights come on. But you better be back.
I remember that because in the summer of those years, at 8 o'clock or 8:30 in the morning, especially during the summer when they were at home, they said, "I've worked all week. Go away." And they push you out of the house, and then you're just gone until the sun goes down.
I want to know what Jake does, because he's got 6 of them. What do you do? Because if you do that with 1 or 2 of them, you still got 4 left.
Yeah. No, we don't really send them out. I mean, I think childhood has changed so much since then because of what the way kids socialize now. So much of it is online, whether it's through video games or Facebook or whatever. The kids are using these days. I should probably get on top of that. But I think it's just changed so much that they don't go out as much. And honestly, as a parent, with all the crap that goes on in the world, I'm not sure I want them to go out as much as I did as a kid. And I don't think I went out as much as you guys did.
No, because I will say that I don't think there's as much of stuff going on now as there was. I just think if one thing happens, it's on the news cycle, on the national news. Because I'll be watching the national news, and they'll say, "Oh, this little kid is missing." Why did this kid elevate himself past all the other kids that get lost on a daily basis? because I don't think
Yeah.
it's any more or less. I just think parents are scared more.
Well,
Yeah,
you
I
know,
think you're right.
I think so too. I mean, I remember those years. From 7 to 10 or 11. I mean, if I was not in school, I just didn't wear shoes. I was out there all the running around barefoot and just goofing off with friends and stuff.
Apparently, I didn't know Alan was a hillbilly.
Yeah, dude, I'm still here in Texas. You know, we're all
Listen, my kid.
But it's
kids
100
went back-
degrees. How do you get on the asphalt? Don't you burn your feet?
Well,
toughen up.
it's hotter now than it was back then. Global warming is a real thing.
Oh, that's right. You grew up in the Ice Age. I forgot.
So my kids have been home since March. Today was their first day going back to school. We literally had to look for one of my oldest son, who has not put on shoes forever. We had to look for his shoes today because we had no idea where they were. So he could go to school because that's
Right.
how long it's been since he's had shoes on. So,
It's a school full of Nels. They all had nobody say in the wind, and they're just kind of walking around. They don't know what to act or how to behave. It's just Jodie
Yeah,
Foster's Nell. It's everybody at school today.
Yep.
That was
Probably.
a very
That's
good
a
Nell
good-
reference. I am
was a good
very
Nell
impressed
reference.
with that.
I love that. I used to do that all the time. In the wind.
So, but I do feel like you watch this movie and it is what I understand it was like in the 70s. I mean, and there's stuff that you just wouldn't see. I mean, the fact that Buttermaker the whole time, every game, every practice, he's got beer. I mean, he's got
Oh,
a
yeah.
can at least of
Yeah.
beer. And I'm like,
And-
there's no way they're going to show that in what is a family-friendly-ish type movie.
Yeah.
And he's not specific to one brand.
No, he's cheap.
No.
It's whatever's
Very-
cheapest.
I'm sure it's whatever's on sale at the time.
We used
Yeah,
to do the
for sure.
same thing in our softball team. We just you're in charge of getting 4 12-packs of beer. So
Yeah.
you go into the store and whatever was cheap, usually right at the front door,
That's what you got.
grabbed. And yeah, he was drinking Schlitz. He was drinking Budweiser.
My dad was
Miller.
a
Red
Schlitz man.
Stripe.
My dad was a Schlitz man. So
Yeah.
that and Lone Star, but Lone Star's awful. I mean, I live in Texas and Lone Star's terrible. So
And
But,
the kid with the motorcycle blew my mind too. Like, was that something that happened?
Yeah.
Like 10,
Yeah,
11-year-old
sure.
kids riding around on motorcycles?
Yeah, oh, yeah.
yeah,
I
mean,
had friends that would go right out in the fields. Yeah.
yeah. The thing about Kelly Leak is, I don't know. I feel like I know these kids. I feel like they're
Sure.
kids that I grew up with. I felt very close to them you understand them really well. And when I saw it, I was 6 years old, and I just really identified with all the characters. One of the things that I discovered later, watching this movie, it's written by a guy named Bill Lancaster. Two things you need to know about Bill Lancaster. First thing is he's Burt Lancaster's son.
Okay.
The other screenplay he wrote is John Carpenter's The Thing. Okay. So
That is a good resume right there.
yeah, those two movies, and you know what? You watch them and you think about it, and you listen to the cadence of all the characters, and they sound really similar, and the relationships between them, and the antagonistic relationship in some points between those characters in the Bad News Bears and in The Thing are very, very similar, and I love that about it. I mean, and he's one of my favorites. I mean, he's only written really 2 films, but
Yeah,
I mean,
but those, what, 2?
he's gone.
Right.
He's gone now, but those 2 movies are fantastic. Obviously,
It's not quantity, it's quality. The other thing you won't see is an 11-year-old girl going on a date to a rock concert with some dude. And Walter Mathau's like, I don't think this is right, but he doesn't really stop her. And she's 11
no.
years old. You don't know.
Yeah.
You're not going to the Rolling Stones at 11 at Friday at 8.
Tell you what,
Yeah.
no 11-year-old girl in my house is doing that. That's
No,
for sure.
no 11-year-old girl should be doing that anytime.
Right.
Because like I
Well,
said, even Walter Mathau was kind of hesitant. So it's not
Yeah.
necessarily acceptable back then,
When
but there's no
Buttermaker-
parents around.
No, there really isn't. The parents, like you guys mentioned, the parents in this film, even the guy who comes and starts the baseball team, I'm still not 100% clear which son was his, because it was so his kid could play and all the other kids, but then there's really no connection between him and the kids that you see on the film. You know what I mean? It's just he's
I
there,
know
but he's
his-
not there.
I know who his son is. I just can't remember the name. There's so many names to remember. I mean, the most names I remember is Tanner, Kelly Leak, and and Amanda.
And Lupus.
And
Was he
Lupus,
Ogilvy's
yeah.
dad? Is it Ogilvy?
Ogilvy. I think
Yeah.
it's not Ogilvy.
No, Ogilvy was the nerd. It wasn't him. It was the other. So I think it was Tanner, the little blonde kid, and then there was Lupus, the quiet blonde kid, and then there was a third blonde kid that has the same haircut.
Yeah, I think
Well, they all had the same haircuts. They all had that
Well,
straight, bleached
yeah.
yellow hair. I have pictures of my wife because when she was a little girl, she had that same little haircut because it's just easy to do back in the 70s and 80s.
And yeah, the movie is rough in comparison to modern day kids, right? I mean, they don't play around with it. But one of the things that I appreciated even on recent rewatching is that all of these characters have arcs. They're not the same person from the beginning to the end of the film. The first scene, one of the first few scenes that we see Tanner, for example, and he's just cussing up a storm and he's dropping all the words that he drops. And, the scene where he takes up for Lupus and he gets beat up, and then he tells Lupus, well, if you weren't picking your nose all the time, maybe people wouldn't give you so much crud. But the look on his face when he says it, he's like, he understands. I mean, this is a film when they talk about bullying in high school or bullying in school, and this is a film with like, well, it's part of their natural life. These kids have been bullied forever.
Yeah.
They don't even acknowledge an existence without bullying, really. Yeah. And these kids have an arc to them, and at the end of the day, like one of my favorite lines of this film is Ahmed, and when he says, "This one's for Allah. It's going out there, sucker." And I love that part. I love that part so much. And I'm thinking, and when that part played in the theater, when we watched it, everybody just started cheering. It's like this great moment. And that, that's why you can't make this movie in you can't sand down the edges, because the edges are the point. These are kids that are emulating the adults around them, and they think that this is how grown-ups behave, and they're not really told otherwise because the parents they're just not there. So when they're learning to be kids again. And when Buttermaker sees, he says, "Don't you want to get these guys?" And he screams at him, and then the camera pans to all their shots, and he sees that they just want to have fun. They want to be kids, and there shouldn't be this much weight on a baseball game. And and I mean that's really why I love the film as much as I do. I mean, it's like I said, it's kind of an anti-sports movie
and a true 70s movie, because in most movies in the 70s, you don't win.
Yeah,
that's
another thing. That's another thing. So
life is not a bunch of series of victories. Life is a series of failures with the occasional victory to convince you to keep going, because it's like being a millionaire. People think they're all inevitable, just waiting to be millionaires at some point. No, most of us are going to be poor or middle class for all of our lives, no matter how hard we struggle. But there's always that little bit of hope that we could be a millionaire, so we keep trying, and we keep trying, and we keep working, and we keep trying to do something different and be our best.
It's interesting that Rocky and the Bad News Bears came out in the same year, and they both lose.
Yep.
That's true. And I think, I'm not trying to speak for my generation, Gen Xers, but I think that...
I thought you were a baby boomer.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm a Neanderthal.
I got the white beard. I'm the oldest looking one here. That's...
showing people winning.
Yes, oldest looking. We'll say looking. Yeah.
Well, your beard is whiter than mine, Craig.
That's what I just said. Thanks for paying attention.
I sure did. I was on a roll, and you kind of stopped me right on track. But a movie that I think teaching. I mean, and Craig has written a book about it. I think teaching about losing is more important than teaching how to win. How to lose is where your dignity comes in. And it's whether it's Rocky saying, "Well, I don't care if I win the match. I'm just going to go to the distance." To these kids who give everything they can to put it out there, and everybody gets a shot. Lupus gets a shot. All the other kids who don't play very well get a shot. And it's the loser kids, quote unquote, that actually give them a chance to get on board to win the game. And then there's just a bad play that Kelly Leak doesn't get there. And losing is more instructional than winning. And the way these kids hold their dignity at the end, it says they treat us like crap all year, and we're just not going to take it. We could play you right again right now, and the same thing would happen. We might lose, we might win. We are just as good as you are, and we may have lost today, but we won't lose tomorrow. And I think it's a valuable lesson. I don't want to burn any of the other generations down, but other generations don't have loser movies.
That's true. That's very true. I was going to say, growing up, I consider myself a child of the 80s and 90s. This movie ends with them winning the championship if it's made in the 80s or 90s. I mean, it did. I mean, it was called the Mighty Ducks, and it was about hockey. But, it ends with them winning, right? And and that's what we watched growing up. And so it's very interesting to go back and watch a movie that's kind of the same premise, but they don't win at the end. And what are the lessons that you can learn from that? And it's one of the things I've always loved about the first Rocky movie is he doesn't win in the end, but it's a victory because he did go the distance.
Yep.
Right.
He made it to the end of the fight, which is what he wanted to do, and that's a victory to him. And I think that just speaks to where everything was in America, especially in the 70s compared to in the 80s and 90s.
Oh yeah, we just came off Vietnam.
Watergate.
Everything was, everything was a losing experience for most people at the time. The traffic line, the gas lines on the inflation. It was just, it wasn't. I'm not going to make any comparisons to now, but it wasn't a great time in America at the time. So for people to understand there is value in losing, there's a lesson to be learned there. You should learn it and take the most of it. So I love Bad News Bears for that.
Yeah, that's a great point. For me, and I'm curious about this. You said you showed this and to a theater a couple years ago, and half the people hadn't seen it before. What were the reactions generally of the people who hadn't seen it before?
Well, the one I remember the most is when Vic Morrow hits his kid on the mound.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And the way everybody, because everybody's laughing, everybody's having fun, enjoying the game, and then suddenly the theater sound just drops. Nobody says anything. They say, and then everybody's quiet. It's like, dude, I mean, they may not. I mean, parents hit their kids. Bad parents hit their kids. And that whole moment, everybody's quiet, and then everything gets serious, and it's like, well, this is supposed to be a baseball game. Why is it like this? Why are we like this? And I mean, I don't want to make upset anybody, but I'm a liberal. I don't care to let everybody know it. And the whole thing about this film to me is that, sure, sports is great. It can teach you friendship. It can, teach you all sorts of valuable things. But when it gets to the point where you are in a competition and you have to hit your kid because they're doing something wrong on the mound,
right,
then it's gone way too far. It's gone way too far.
Absolutely.
But the whole reaction to the kid who, he says, he holds the ball after he catches it and everything happens and they get runs in. That kid, by the way, is the little kid in The Courtship of Eddie's Father, which is probably a show that might be before your time. But
he definitely looked familiar to me because I remember seeing that. But that is Bill Bixby.
Okay.
Yeah, that was the show before The Incredible Hulk, so it's even before then. So that shows you how old Alan and I are.
Yeah,
I remember The Incredible Hulk. I didn't get into Bixby.
Of course you are. You're a nerd. Of course you remember The Incredible Hulk.
But that scene really caused the crowd to kind of freak out. The ending, the last moments when they throw the trophy and everything, and I think hearing Tanner just go on his rants, it's like, their eyes would get bigger, and it's like, kids don't talk like that, and it's like, oh yes they do. You're just not around them.
You need to spend some more time around kids because they do.
I don't blame him for throwing that trophy because you saw how big the first place trophy was, and then the second place trophy was like a broken piece off the top of the best trophy.
Yeah.
I would have thrown it away too.
Yeah. Well, but that's the way it goes in sports, right? The big trophy for the first place, and nobody remembers who second place was.
Sure, but that's where most of us are, and most of us are going to be second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth place. So how do you live with that? How do you learn from that? And that's why movies in the 70s were so great, is because they were trying to teach people that getting knocked down hopefully it doesn't happen too hard or too drastically. But we've all been in situations recently where whether it's a health situation or it's a financial situation, what are you going to do besides sit there and cry about it?
Yeah.
Because no one's going to rescue you. Hopefully you have a safety net of some sort, but most of us, if something happens, we maybe have a spouse to rely on, and that's about it. We're all in it ourselves. So if you have those tools ahead of time, before bad things happen, when it does happen, you're not completely thrown. I mean, I knew that when the 2008 financial disaster happened, the suicide rate amongst 20-year-olds went through the roof because for a lot of them, it was the first time they ever failed in anything.
Right.
And so they didn't have the tools or the mindset to even fathom what would happen if things went wrong. So
Well, the great news for millennials is we're getting used to it now. So
no, you're not even millennials, and yeah, you guys are. What's the new generation called? I don't even know what they're the ones that are going to really get
Gen
screwed.
Gen Y or Gen Z.
Yeah.
No, millennials are Gen Y, and the new one's Gen Z. Well, you're gonna run out of letters of the alphabet. I'll go through.
There's Gen Z, and then there's another one. It's like I can't remember.
Zillennials or Zillennials or something like
can't
that.
remember.
Yeah.
I'm just waiting for them to be called the Eoli, and that'll be done. What's the Morlocks and the from the?
Yeah. That's
another
probably
evolution.
That's probably next week. Yeah.
That'll be a good
Talking about-
Thanksgiving.
Talking about the scene where the kid gets hit on the mound, like for me, I'm watching the movie and I had seen it before. It'd been a long time, so I'm rewatching it for the show tonight. As I'm watching it, I'm sitting there thinking, okay, eventually Walter Matthau's character is going to like come around and he's going to be like a good guy. And me, not perfect, but a good guy, right? Because he's really not great with the kids. I mean, he's not bad with the kids. He's not abusive like the other coaches. He just doesn't care.
Yeah.
Right.
And then when he's coaching the championship game and he's yelling at him and he's calling them names and every time they don't listen to what he wants them to do and the whole thing, and he's got caught up in the whole competition of it. I'm like, okay, eventually he's going to come around. And then of course it's the moment when the kid gets hit on the mound and he starts to realize, like for him, that seems to be the moment where he kind of starts coming around to like, what are we really doing here? And does it really matter whether we win or lose? And, more than the kids having a good time. And that's when he sends Lupus in and the dad comes down and yells at him for doing that and everything else. I just felt like it took a long time to get to that point. I'm used to my characters like this that are kind of grumpy and bad in the beginning that redeem themselves at the end. I'm used to them doing that sooner in the movie.
Yeah, they don't redeem themselves in the end.
Well, 5 minutes before the credits.
Yeah, they redeem themselves in the middle, so you have a whole half of a movie to enjoy them. But
Right.
But you have Walter Matthau, who is such a great curmudgeon.
Right.
Yes.
That he's not dislikable. So he's kind of apathetic. Think about it. He's a freelancer. He's a hired gun. He's only there. He doesn't have any kids involved. He probably isn't even involved in the community at all. He just got this. I wouldn't be surprised if Chico's bail bonds was someplace that he had used on a couple occasions.
Maybe.
Probably. That's how he knew about him.
He could care less about the kids. He just wants to check, and the kids kind of grow on him. I think he really does appreciate Tatum O'Neal's character.
Yeah, Amanda.
Amanda. I think he really appreciates her, but he screwed things up with her mom, and once you do that, it's hard to do as a stepdad to begin with, because he wasn't a stepdad, he was a step-boyfriend. So even at that point, it's hard to maintain a relationship at all. So I think he kind of understands that, the kids are okay, but he doesn't have to like them. He just has to coach them.
There's a couple of things in here that, I think that Buttermaker, he recognizes in these kids a little something in himself because he's a loser. He knows he's a loser, and he thinks these kids are losers too. One of the first moments in the movie that I kind of, it's a little tiny thing, but I like it, where one of the players is going up to bat and he says, maybe I should, I'm normally a left-hander, maybe I should switch to the other side of the plate. And Buttermaker says, no, not yet. And it's like, he's coaching him right at that moment. He's coaching him, and it's like, so he's slowly but surely coming along to these kids. And then when Ahmed climbs the tree and he takes off all his clothes and he says, he says, it's I know you want to quit, but it's a nasty habit. Once you get started, it's hard to quit. It's hard to break. And, I think he starts to, when he's really kind of connecting with the kids earlier than it seems like. It's just that when he realizes that they can actually win and he's going to do it at all costs, because then it stops being about them and starts being about him.
Yeah,
and then another moment for that is one of my favorite moments in the movie. I have a lot of them. This is one of my favorite films. Where Amanda's trying to get him to go out with her mom again, and the way that he kind of like methodically says, I am bad for you. I'm a terrible person, and the only way I can probably cut you out of this is to really go for the throat, which he does. And then there's that shot as she walks away where he's drinking the beer and he's got tears running down his face. Yeah, and
he throws a lot of stuff.
It's a really great performance by him. It's one of my he's incredible in it.
Well, he's throwing. He got real mad at the catcher when this is right after they decide that they voted and they're going to quit. That's when he's not going to. And he throws I mean, and he doesn't just kind of toss it. He whips the clothes at the kid. He throws that beer at her. He is not a nice guy, but that's the 70s as well. They're treated like little adults, and you don't see that in movies.
Because those kids were humiliated by that first game. They lost so bad.
Oh yeah.
And when Buttermaker sees how bad they lost and how bad that he was so disconnected that it happened, he felt guilty. And it's like, no, I'm at least they're not going to quit like this. They're not going to quit at their lowest point. If they're going to go out, they're going to go out at least with some dignity and on their own terms. So I mean, I think that's even though he's throwing a damn mitt at somebody's head, I think he's trying to let the kids understand how much, you can't just dump it. You have to see it through.
Yeah. And I love the conversation with Ahmed, because that's where he tells the whole story about Hank Aaron and the 42 errors that he had in a little league game and just making stuff up. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was so much easier to do that to kids back in the day because they could go home and Google it. Like,
exactly.
Nowadays, Ahmed's going home checking it. That guy's full of crap, man. There's no way that really happened. But
Ogilvy, I have to give Ogilvy credit. He knew what was going on, and that's what I liked. This is how you would fix arguments back then, before the internet. You would say, "Well, go ask that person," and knowing that they couldn't do it now, they'd have to wait, and by that time you're well gone. And so
that's true.
So you could just say anything you wanted. That's why I think politicians are so stupid now, because I think they don't they understand they're being videotaped and recorded constantly. Yeah. So they'll say something and they're like, "I never said that." Well, here's a video of it. And but back then, you could literally say anything you wanted. Say, "Go ask your friend who's not there." Right. Stall, and then you'd sneak out the back and you'd be done. You'd be everything was, and you won that argument in the moment.
And by the time you get back, they've gotten.
I'm curious to see what was y'all's first experiences with the movie. How Jake, Tracy, when did y'all see it first?
It was probably when I was about 5 or 6. I was born in 1975, so it was early 80s.
Yeah,
when I saw
HBO.
It. Yeah,
was it on that HBO loop?
No, it was a VHS tape my mom rented from the video store.
Ooh.
Yeah. See, I remember like the Bad News Bears and Breaking Training, which they went to the Astrodome, which I lived in Houston at the time. I still live in Houston, but my cousin was there at that game because what they had done is they filmed it. I think it was a 2-day shoot, and they had back-to-back Astros games. So they would play the game beforehand, and then the Astros would come on, and they had crowd audiences watching him, and my cousin was in the crowd. I was so jealous of him for that.
Until you saw the movie.
Oh yeah, it's not good. No.
And then when they went to Japan, it was worse. So
that was terrible.
Oh, it was diminishing returns on those. Oh
yeah, big time.
I think I watched this. I was probably in my teens. My dad had me watch it with him. He was a big baseball movie nut. He's a big baseball nut, and so if it was baseball movie, he introduced me to The Natural and Field of Dreams and all of those. And this was one that I watched with him. And so it wasn't one that I necessarily grew up with, though. Like I think I saw it like once or twice, and then watched it for this episode.
I don't know what makes baseball such a cinematic sport on movies. Because there are some, but when you think of football movies, there's not. It's hard to really think of most football movies are. I love Remember the Titans. I love that one, but
sure, right.
But there's something iconic in, very much American about baseball, obviously. Right. So because it doesn't really, movies like that don't really play overseas as well as they do here. And this one, especially because the final shot is of the American flag. And, there's just something really beautiful and it reminds you of the good things in America when it comes to baseball. And even though this movie is showing the bad side of America in a lot of ways, but
I think baseball is a series of individual achievements that are happening. The pitcher is by himself throwing to a batter who's by himself, and then the ball goes to somebody. It doesn't go to a group. Like with football, the quarterback has to throw it to somebody, or the running back has to run through a crowd of people. Where baseball, everybody's spaced out. You get to see their faces. That's the other thing. You see their faces. You can identify. That's why basketball movies are so good too. I think it's the fact that you can see their face and relate with them. I think that's why basketball and baseball are much better. Like Hoosiers is an unbelievable movie, but I think it's because you can see their face. They're individuals playing, They don't have to be all crowded up.
Yeah.
And-
Although in defense of football movies, I will say my all-time favorite sports movie is Rudy, which
Well,
is,
yeah. But
I
it centers on him, you know.
Yeah,
so
there's
right.
not
It's
much
not about the
football.
football game. It's not like Remember the Titans, where there is a lot of the game involved in Remember the Titans. Rudy, like, he's got like 5 minutes on the field at the end of the movie, and that's kind of it.
Yeah,
But
and he's doing individual things. What they can do is they watch
Right.
him run at a guy and hit him, not him weave through traffic, block, catch the ball, touchdown. No, it's him hit the guy down, hit the guy down.
the thing about high school football movies is that whenever you see the actual games, there's just no way kids play like that. It's,
Oh, yeah,
right, obviously,
absolutely.
Right.
yeah. But you know, these
'cause
kids,
you go to a real high school football game, and no, it doesn't look like that at all.
no,
It's not even close.
no, and you go to but you go to a baseball game and it looks like the Bad News Bears, you know.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So very much.
Any of the leagues that I ever played in as a kid, because we didn't do any of like the super fancy little league. It was always like the community Parks and Rec kind of little league games that we would play, and we looked just like the Bad News Bears every time, every year, because it was like always like our first year together, and you didn't build a team that you played with year after year and things like that. It was, you know, my parents couldn't afford to put me in the big leagues like that, the big little leagues.
Yeah.
So
I played baseball briefly in high school, but it was I played maybe for a game. I said, this is not for me, and it's like I became manager, which was kind of weird on its own. But there's nothing. There isn't. I mean, when if it's happened to me, I mean, I'm sure it's happened. I mean, a lot of people where you're just bad at it, and then
yeah,
somebody pops a ball in your area, and you grab it, and you feel like, holy crap!
I think
I contributed.
I'm amazed. Yeah, exactly. I contributed. I
did something.
I have a moment. I've justified my existence for a few measly seconds. You know. So yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
I remember being really into the sports movies, and I still am. I really enjoy sports movies. But I think as a teenager being into them, I was like, well, I want to play sports, and I was not athletic at all. I know that's shocking when you look at me to see that I was not very athletic. Because I had a similar.
You've got
build in high school.
linebacker written all over you, my friend.
Well, maybe lineman. I don't know about linebacker. But what I realized is I enjoyed the sports movies because I enjoyed the movies. And for me, sports movies really got me into movies in general, because I realized I enjoy the story. I enjoy the cinematography. I enjoy the visual storytelling that comes in the movies. And it just happened to be about a sport.
Yeah, exactly. I feel the same way, because I love sports films, and I mean, there's one that came out a couple of years ago that I just watched recently called Goon. I don't know if you've seen it. It's about hockey, and it's with Shawn Michaels.
I've heard about that one.
Yeah, Shawn Michael Scott, isn't it?
Is that Sean William Scott?
Sean William Scott. Sorry.
There you go.
And it's basically about a guy who he's a bouncer in a bar, and he could beat up people really well, but he can't skate for crap. And then one of the minor league coaches says, well, you sure can pound somebody. Why don't you be one of my? Why don't you be a goon on my team? You know, somebody. So basically, his job is to, if somebody knocks somebody down, he beats the crap out of them, and
He's an enforcer.
Yeah, he's an enforcer. It's a really, really good sports film.
Liev Schreiber's in that, right? He's the other big goon.
I think we actually had somebody suggest that for our movie month. We didn't select it this time. We'll have to do it again.
It's really hard R, so it's probably it's. I mean, the stuff they say.
So that's rated X in Utah.
Yeah, the stuff they say in.
It may not even be allowed in the state.
The stuff they say in Goon is far worse than they say in the Bad News Bears. But to be fair, not very many movies drop what the Bad News Bears drops. So
that is probably the worst sentence anybody's ever said, and have it to come out of a 8-year-old, 9-year-old kid is amazing.
Yeah,
because I can't. I mean, you use one of those terms in a sentence, it's bad. To have it, it's like it's just a rapid fire of horrible slurs that you would never see.
And not just that, like, he says it, but nobody's really shocked when he says it either.
Oh, no.
They're
Yeah,
like,
that's
right.
yeah.
like, it's just normal. Like,
Yeah.
Well, you got to remember that as you're not one of these da-da-da-da-da-da-das on the team, that the rest of us are, trying to let them know, like,
So
but,
I beat the
like,
crap
it
out of
was
you right
normal.
now.
I
Yeah.
will say that kid for being in Chino, California, has one hell of a Boston accent.
Yeah. Yeah. But it worked for his character, though. Like, it doesn't make any sense geographically or anything else, but it works.
I love how you think that's a character choice.
Well,
like
I
that
don't
kid
think it
can't
was. I
talk
think
any other
that's
way.
He insulted
I
with
think
the
that's just how he
director.
talked, but it worked. It worked. I don't mean that he chose it. I mean it just happened to work well with his character. So
Because when he tells him to, why don't you just go away and drink your beer? Drink your beer. Go away. Drink your beer. It's like, oh, it sounds like every kid I grew up with.
And nobody would ever call him Buttermaker. It was either Buttercrud or Boilermaker or
yeah, Butterman.
yeah.
Yeah, it was never Buttermaker.
Yep.
And that's why I had to stop and think when I said earlier, I think it was Buttermaker, but now I can't remember because there were so many different names that everybody called him.
Yeah.
So
He's incredible in that movie. Mathau's great.
he really is. And I think people that like, later generations, we know him from like Grumpy Old Men and things like that, but you've really got to go back and see what he did as an actor before that. Like in this movie, The Odd Couple, he did great work in that. Like,
hey, don't discount Grumpy Old Men. Those were great. And Burgess Meredith is my favorite person in the world because of those movies.
Hey, you can't get to Die Hard without the Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3, which is Walter Matthau stars in that film. And
that's true.
That's a great film.
That's true.
Yeah. He
now
was a great actor.
I think it's interesting. I wanted to ask you guys, because you do on your show, you guys always pick alternate casts, and that's how Cast Off came to be. So with Walter Matthau, he was actually the third pick for the film. It was Steve McQueen and Warren Beatty.
Yeah.
For it originally. And how different do you think the film would be? Do you think it would work with either one of those guys?
With Steve McQueen, yes.
I don't think it would work. It would work with Steve McQueen, but I still think the movie would be pretty different. It would not work with Warren Beatty.
No.
Warren Beatty would not.
I can't see that at all. Yeah,
especially in 1976, Warren Beatty.
Right.
The whole thing about Buttermaker is that he's a walking failure, and it's hard to believe
Warren Beatty to be that character.
Yeah, he would never put himself into that place. So
Interesting that Warren Beatty was considered for this movie and Rocky.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Which he couldn't have done either one of those roles.
I think he's just a little bit too glamorous for this kind of parts, and so I don't think he'd handle it. It's funny because
he was just the it guy at the time, right, or one of the it guys at the time.
Yeah. I mean, when it's funny on our show, Craig's really good at recasting. I'm better at the double feature, so that's kind of how I look at it. So whenever I do recasting, I end up like I have posters on the wall. I start looking at cast members in the posters. So
Kaiser Soze's it. He really just Kaiser Soze's the whole thing.
Yeah,
he's like, if you can tell, because Jeff Bridges he does Jeff Bridges a lot. If you look over his shoulder,
and there's a Jeff Bridges poster right behind him. Yeah,
look back here.
Christopher Reeve, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah,
that's funny to me because I stress out about that part of the show every time I'm on your show. Is how am I going to recast this movie? And I don't want to sound stupid, so that's funny. You guys just pull it out of the air.
Go ahead.
I don't work on it as probably as much as Craig would like, but
yes. The fact that here's what I have to cut out every episode. Oh man, this is hard. Every episode I got to take that cut it out because I have to take that out multiple times, and then he'll come out with amazing cast because Alan knows actors. That's why we do it. It's because it's a great way to. It's not just recasting as a gimmick. It's a great way to talk about the characters because I know Alan will get upset once in a while because we'll be talking about the movie and he'll start going into character after character and say, well, let's do some recasting. But we haven't talked about the movie. I'm like, but yes, we're going to, believe me, and we do. We end up taking the character and talking about why they're so great, what makes them important, and then what scenes, and next thing you know, we're talking about the actual movie. Recasting is just a little trick that I use to get him to talk even more about the movie.
That's true.
Yeah.
We really deep dive.
You guys do really deep dive. I love being on the show and I love listening to the show because you guys go so deep into the movies, and
we appreciate
it's really interesting for me. So,
but I only take about 15-20 minutes to recast. I usually, what happens is if we're gonna do a show, say we record on Saturdays at 3 p.m., which is 5 Allen's time. So around 2:15, I will sit down and look at the list and get an idea of what I'm thinking about because I've just seen the movie, but I don't take notes or anything. I used to do that the first couple episodes, and I realized, I'm just wasting my time.
He's doing way more work than I am.
Yeah, but I don't have the brain you have. See, you have the encyclopedic brain that you can get people's names, and if I tell you a name, you know what movies they've done, and I have none of that. That's why I love baseball, but I can't do any of the stats. Can't remember any of them. My brain doesn't work that way. I'm really good at watching a movie and hearing a voice and going, wait a second, is that
I know who that is.
like we were watching True Detective 3, season 3, and this is not a big spoiler at all, but I was like, I hear a voiceover and I go, is Michael Rooker in this movie? No. And then sure enough, he shows up and I wasn't expecting him in it. And my wife hates me because she'll watch Law and Order and someone will come on and I'm like, either they're the MacGuffin or they did it because that person is too good to just show up for one episode. You know?
Yeah. Well, you watch enough movies or TV shows or things like that, and then you start to pick up on how they put the stories together and what works and what doesn't. And it's to me, that's part of the fun. I feel like then I'm kind of in on it with the director and the writers and everything. And so when it happens and it plays out like I think, I'm like, okay, that I feel like I was in on the story and the joke the whole time, and that can be entertaining as well.
Yeah, and when it comes to the Bad News Bears, one of the things that I've always enjoyed about it is that it is a meandering movie. It takes a while to get to certain things. It takes its time. It's not all that long a movie. It's probably a little over 90 minutes, but
hour 46.
It's like an hour 40 or something like that.
Yeah. So, but it doesn't rush it. Every character has a moment, and even all the kids, you might not know their names, but you know who they are by personality. Everybody's different. I mean, you get Ogilvy, or you get Tanner, or you get Amanda, or you get Kelly Leak, and even the Mexican brothers, you know who they are, and it takes us time to build those characters, get a rapport with them, and you get to like them because they're just kids, and they're trying to be adults in a lot of ways, and it's kind of cute, but they're
like
not,
is a strong term, because if I actually ran into these kids in real life, I'm not sure I wouldn't Vic Morrow these kids in real life. In the movies,
say that. You know what happened to Vic Morrow on the Twilight Zone?
Well, that's not what I might want to drop a helicopter on them too. I don't know. I'm just saying. Oddly enough, there's a stuntman in this movie, in the Bad News Bears, who also died by a helicopter crash. So there's two people in this movie who died by helicopter crashes.
Man.
Yeah, wow. Was that the stuntman on the motorcycle? Because let me tell you, that was the best use of a stuntman ever. The kid doesn't wear a helmet the whole movie at any other point, but then when he's popping the wheelies on the field and everything else, he's got a helmet on. Just for no reason. Yeah. And it's because it's a stuntman doing the riding at that point, which makes sense. But
well, both Alan and I have met Jackie Earle Haley. He's not a big guy, so he wasn't a big kid. He probably couldn't do a wheelie because he probably couldn't lift it. He's a very sweet guy, a wonderful guy, good director, but as a kid, he couldn't throw that well either. So every time he'd throw, there'd be a guy behind him throwing as well,
throwing the ball.
And so they'd go up fast. And so you'd see him throw it. Or same thing when he hit the ball, because he couldn't hit the ball either.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this was it was very interesting to watch this movie, because last week we did The Sandlot, which I feel like is the anti-Bad News Bears movie, because it's kind of the same, like it's a still misfit group of kids, but there's not quite the same kind of antics in it. And
no, it's a 90s Bad News Bears.
Yeah.
Well, it's exactly the same thing.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, there's not the Walter Mathau character. There's not the coach, the adult that's getting involved or anything like that. And it's just the kids being kids together.
Yeah. But The Sandlot is a very nostalgic look back at, it's a nostalgic look back at kids playing together and baseball. And it's a good movie, but it's very nostalgic for the time. There's no nostalgia in the Bad News Bears.
No. Well, it's written and played at the time that it's written and played.
Yeah. If you even watch it now as a look back to the 70s, you kind of understand that looking back at that time, it's like, we remember our childhood through a lot of filters, because you look at the world we live in today, or not even today, but just like you have a job, you have responsibilities, you have bills, you have things like that, and you look back at your childhood and you think, well, I was a carefree time, I didn't have anything to worry about, but that's not true. Kids have a ton of things to worry about, and it's just you don't seem to remember it because you're remembering a time where you understand it better now because you're an adult. But when you're a kid, these are everything's a tragedy, everything's a triumph. There's no even ground. It's a hard being kid, whether it's in the 70s, 80s, 90s, no matter what. And I love The Sandlot, but it does kind of glorify those moments. And I feel like The Bad News Bears is a movie that's like, man, being a kid is tough.
Yeah.
It's not easy. And just because you get to play or you have other experiences, and we're remembering it as adults back then, but I mean, I was terrified of a lot of things when I was a kid, and a lot of people were. So I think this movie is honest when it comes to childhood. There aren't very many movies that are honest about childhood.
That's true.
And I mean, you can probably count them on your hand. I feel like E.T. is honest about childhood. It's honest about divorce. I feel like a movie I just had it in my head. To Kill a Mockingbird. Is kind of an honest portrayal of childhood. A movie like Boyhood, Richard Linklater's Boyhood. It's very honest about childhood. Childhood is messy and crude, and it's just the way it is, and the little triumphs are everything, and you build those up in your mind to thinking they're amazing things, but everybody has them, and when you look back on your childhood, it's just different. So
yeah. I agree. And I think, we like to watch those movies that are very nostalgic, and there's something comforting and great about that. But there's also something comforting about watching a movie where you come out of it and you're like, okay, so my family wasn't the only one that was messed up. And my childhood wasn't the only one.
That's pretty much what I watch movies for anyways.
Yeah. And so
that's why my wife and I watched all these murder mysteries, because it's like, you wouldn't turn me in if the cops, and my wife's like, yes, I would. I would turn you in immediately. If my brother killed somebody and I knew about it, I wouldn't be like hiding him. I'd be turning him in as well. Because, I always like, so I like validation sometimes when people do stuff. It's like, that's what I would do as well. And in 70s movies, I think it was probably the most honest time in cinema, because we've been lied to for so long, and they were starting to realize the truth. Watergate, Vietnam, everything. I think that you finally appreciated the fact that they're not lying to us anymore. They lie to us a lot more.
Or they are lying to us, but we can see through it.
That's true. Yeah.
Well, most of us anyway.
Hopefully.
let's go ahead and give this movie a grade. Tracy, we'll start with you, and then we'll go to our guests.
I'm going to go B+. It's a good, solid film. Holds up really well. I remember seeing it as a kid, so it hit all the nostalgia buttons for me. But I still enjoyed it even as an adult, because there are some where you look back on movies you saw as a kid and you go, wow, that's really not good. But this holds up.
Sorry.
Whoa.
Shots fired.
If you didn't grow up watching The Goonies, I agree 100%. If you didn't grow up watching The Goonies, and you don't have the nostalgia factor, it's not as great as everybody says.
I'll just say Goonies opened on a Friday, and I think my puberty hit on a Wednesday before. So that's like it's like didn't take.
Apparently, Martha Plimpton wasn't enough for you, huh?
That close.
Just didn't take. It's like just a little bit too old for this. So yeah.
Craig, what about you?
What I'll give it.
Okay.
I'm going to give it a B+ as well, because it does lag at spots. It is, and you could tighten it up a little bit. I'd like the fact that it does go slower than normal, because it is a 70s movie, and nowadays it's all cut, edit, get off my lawn. But it could have tightened up a little bit. There is some things that are kind of rough, that are true, but they're still kind of rough. So and Vic Morrow, as much as he's a good villain in this, he just looks like every douchebag in the 70s that I ran across that worked with my dad.
He looks just like my uncle in this movie. just like my uncle.
He looks like half the men in the 70s.
Yeah, he does. He does.
He's like a generic. Let's get a most generic coach we could find, and that's the guy. So I'm going to give it a B+ as well. But I do love this and adore this movie. So personally, I'd probably give it an A+. But I mean, for a legitimate grading, it's probably about a B+.
Yeah. What about you, Alan?
A all the way. It's one of my favorite movies. And watching it as an adult and seeing how it comes together, because you don't pick up on all the stuff when you're a kid. You pick up on it partially in a way, but when you're an adult and you watch this, and you realize how the characters interact, and what kind of person Buttermaker is, and what kind of person all the kids are, and the fierce competition that the parents are having, and the whole kind of there's a theme that's running through the whole thing. I love it. I mean, as a critic and as a fan, I give it an A. I think it's one of the best films of the 70s. And I mean, it's not people want to talk about it. I mean, you're going to talk about The Godfather or The Exorcist or The French Connection or Jaws. Those are all great. Star Wars. All those films are great, obviously. But and I hold this up with them. I think it's one of those films that has lessons to teach even now, more than almost 50 years later.
Well, I think I did learn at least 1 or 2 new slurs watching the movie the first time I was a kid.
Yeah, that's good. We always need to learn more slurs.
Well, you need to know these things so when people start using them, you know who the good people are and who the bad people are. Because I grew up in, like Utah, a very homogenous, very white town, and so only the ones that they talked about, if the religious slurs I knew. So when you hear some of the ethnic slurs, you're like, why do they call it that? Why is it this word? My dad was like very awkwardly trying to explain that, you don't use these words. This is what they mean.
So for me, I think it's interesting, Tracy, you say it holds up really well. And I think it does in the way the story is told and everything else. I don't think it ages well in some ways because of a lot of the terms and language. You can't. You got to prepare somebody to watch this for the first time.
Yeah, you do. And I did, like when I screened it, I made sure that people understood this is not a movie that it's definitely of its time. I mean, it doesn't pull any punches, and people are griping. The people like fans of the Gone with the Wind and Blazing Saddles. They're griping about, or some movie fans are like, you shouldn't have to put a historical context in front of these movies. People should just be able to watch them and understand them. It's like, no, I agree with it. I think as long as you don't mess with the movie is fine. But putting in a historical context is very, very important, so people kind of understand what they're getting into. And I think that's a part of being a critic and a part of being a curator of art, is to understand the context of how it was made as well as the story that was being told. So I mean, absolutely, I agree with you. I still love it though. I know it gets very racy, and I know that language is harsh, but at the same time, I mean, I was that age, and I said some pretty heinous shit too. Stuff. Yeah.
It is a snapshot, though. It is a legitimate snapshot. It's not a manufactured type of discourse or whatever you want to call it. It is of its time, yes, but it is an accurate portrayal of its time versus
It's honest.
Versus sometimes they overhype it, like they did the one with was it the Good Boys that just came out last year?
Good Boys.
Yeah, and
I
they
never
were
liked that movie, but
but they were over the top.
Exactly. I mean, the language is rough, but it also feels genuine. The stuff in that movie is like, well, everything's played for a joke in that.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
Exactly. And this one's authentic.
I think for me, I would have to give this a B. There wasn't the nostalgia factor for me because it wasn't something that I grew up watching, but I can also see how this is a template for a lot of the sports movies that I did enjoy growing up.
Yeah.
And how they took bits and pieces from this movie. I mean, you can see bits of The Sandlot, you can see bits of like Mighty Ducks, and you can see those kinds of things that I enjoyed growing up as a kid. And I don't know that you get that without this movie coming first. And so I think for that reason, and it is a classic, and it's one that whether you grew up watching it or not, you have to recognize the value that it brings to the sports movie genre as a whole. So,
well, that's why I like doing like Angels with Dirty Faces, or we go back and we did Kill a Mockingbird, or we do these movies that in the past we don't do them all the time, but when we do, because it is like cinema archaeology. You go back and see. Yeah, you go back and see where everything came from, and then you can see the evolution of it now. Now, do you like the stuff that's now more? Maybe, but at least you can go back and see where it came from. It's when people go back and go, "Oh, this is the same boring stuff that everybody does." No, this is where it came from.
Right.
And if you understand that ahead of time, but of course, the greatest movie in the world is Raiders of the Lost Ark, and it'll never ever change, ever.
Wow. All right. Well,
I just had to say that because
I liked it. It was a good segue from Cinema Archaeology to Raiders of the Lost Ark. It connects. It makes sense.
Hold on.
That's why this guy's a pro.
Archaeology.
There he is.
Cinema Archaeology. That's a great name for a podcast, and someone should do it and do something like that, where you take these older movies and really dig into how they've affected the movies that have come after and things like that.
Yeah,
sounds like homework.
For you,
Well,
that's fun.
I would listen to it.
Yeah.
That's my bread and butter kind of thing. So
Yeah.
yeah, sure.
So yeah, I'll move it like that so you can see my Indiana Jones.
There you go.
I've
This
got
whole
a matching
wall,
one in my office.
this whole
It's
wall here is Indiana Jones, but you can't see that.
Well, we want to thank you guys for being on the show. We really appreciate it. This was a lot of fun to talk about this movie with two fans. If you've got feedback for the show, you can send that to podcast@moviesthatmakeus.com. And of course, if you guys haven't heard, Stolen Droids Media, we are putting on Utah Remote Con. It is coming up in September.
Yes, I was accepted to some secret panelist group today.
What?
It's true.
Don't let anybody
True.
in these days.
I know. I realized this is another one of those fly-by-night cons I'm going to be doing.
We're going to sell you some essential oils. Don't worry.
Yep. Oh, sure.
No, we're not selling
CBD.
anything. That's the
CBD
cool thing
gummies.
about Utah Remote Con. There's nothing to sell. We are just asking you to donate to American Cancer Society, and we're going to set that up and promote that during the con. So all of the panels and everything is going to be free. You guys want to join in and check that out. It won't just be movie stuff. We're talking about all sorts of pop culture topics. So
It sounds exciting. I'm really glad you guys are doing this. It sounds exciting. I'm thrilled to be the little part that I might be doing it.
Well, we appreciate it. It's going to be, I think it's going to be a lot of fun. We'll see how it goes. But in the meantime, thank you guys for being here, and thank you who watched and listened, and we won't see you at the movies. Now I got to put our outro. Okay.